Hello everyone, please press subscribe, press follow, press the bell so you don't miss any new clips. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Author by Flying Alone. Audio novels by Novelist. Chapter 176, Definitely Crippling Him. When they saw how Ling Han acted like he was shooing away a flock of ducks, the spectators could not help but want to laugh. Wherever he stepped, the four guardian deities would disperse as if they were a flock of birds. The spectators were also secretly amazed at Ling Han's overwhelming courage to actually dare to oppose Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan had now neatly become the king of the academy. First, when the imperial guards came to the academy to apprehend him, they were forced to retreat in the face of Liang Guangzu's tough attitude, and there was actually no sign of anger from the imperial family. In the end, the matter was simply settled peacefully. Next, Feng Luo, who had been expelled from the academy, returned and even attempted to commit a violent crime right in public. Even a teacher of the academy could only stand by and watch helplessly. This was practically out of control and with completely zero regard for any rules. Not even a core disciple and the son of the emperor like the third imperial prince would dare to act so boldly, yet Xuanhuan dared. And now that someone who actually dared to oppose the Feng clan appeared, how could they not all give him a thumbs up and praise him for his courage? Ha 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 ha. The spectators all laughed loudly. They did not dare to so publicly oppose Xuanhuan, but a little harmless laughter should be fine. He couldn't possibly hold a grudge over a little laughter, right? The four guardian deities felt angry, enraged, and helpless all at once. In terms of ability, they were sure that they could completely suppress Ling Han, but he had a hostage in his hands, so they could only be cautious in their movements. There was no way for them to put all their efforts in. They could only run around all over the place, and this made them feel unbearably sullen. Ling Han did not treasure the weapon in his hands. He simply crashed, hit, threw and banged the weapon any which way he liked. Under such treatment, Feng Luo was actually awakened by the pains in his body. Ling Han, he screamed shrilly, an incomparable rage brimming in his tone. How many times was this? That he had experienced a loss at Ling Han's hands. I want you to die. I want you to die. He roared furiously. If he couldn't even vent his anger through an enraged roar, he would go crazy. Oh, you're awake. Ling Han gave a cold, eerie smile, and simply tossed Feng Luo onto the ground. That's good. I want you to watch how your two arms are sliced off. Why you dare? Feng Luo was terrified. Why do I not dare? Ling Han said calmly. Just now, you wanted to slice off my friend's arm, and now I can't slice off your arm. Or is it that you think that I can't even compare to an idiot like you? My brother would definitely not spare you. Feng Luo caught onto the last sliver of hope for him, threatening Ling Han with his brother. You speak as if your brother would become my underling once I let you go. Ling Han shook his head, and waved his sword a bit. Cherish the moment now and gaze for a moment longer at your two arms, as very quickly, you will be saying an eternal farewell to them. No, no, no. Feng Luo was finally so terrified that he had started to cry with snot and tears. He did not want to become a handicap. He was still young, and if he lost his arms, how would he be able to bully others or play with beautiful women in the future? Stop. The four guardian deities all shouted in unison. No one would be able to save him. Ling Han shook his head, his voice cold as ice. Oh, then what about me? A voice filled with dignity rang out and Xuanhuan appeared. He had his hands behind his back as if he were an emperor, and was exuding a powerful aura of domination. My lord. The four guardian deities all fell into a half-kneeling position, respectfully paying their greetings. Brother, save me, save me. Feng Luo was both surprised and delighted. In his eyes, there was nothing that Xuanhuan could not do. As long as his brother was here, he would be saved. And who do you think you are? Ling Han asked calmly. There was no hint of disdain in his tone, as if he was merely stating a very ordinary statement of truth. Feng Yan could not help as killing intent rose within him, but when his eyes swept over Feng Luo, he said, "Let go of my brother, and I can spare you this one time." "You speak as if you have some kind of special status." Ling Han snorted. "Since you two brothers are finally both here, then I can get started." He raised his sword. What? He had not acted before, because he was deliberately waiting for Feng Yan to appear. This was really too arrogant of him, wasn't it? Deliberately waiting for Feng Yan to appear to make his move. Was he trying to form a life or death enmity with Feng Yan? What the others did not know was that these two young men already had a life or death enmity between them. However, in Feng Yan's eyes, he could very easily erase Ling Han's existence from this world, and did not take it seriously at all. "Brother, brother!" Feng Luo maniacally struggled and cried out, crying so much that his face was covered with snot and tears. In the end, Feng Yan was moved, and said, "If you dare, then I will definitely kill you today." Both sides were similarly ruthless. One side wanted to slice off the arms of someone, while the other side declared loudly the intention to commit murder. It was as if neither of them took the rules of the academy or the laws of Rain Country to heart. "Idiot," Ling Han said coldly, and his sword lowered swiftly in a strike. "You are seeking death." Feng Yan shot towards Ling Han. With his ability, he at least had a 70% chance of blocking Ling Han's sword strike successfully. Ziu. He was indeed very fast, as if he was a furious arrow. Just when Ling Han's sword was about to fall onto Feng Luo's shoulder, Feng Yan's hand struck forwards as well. Origin power rolled out and wrapped around his palm, making his whole arm turn white silver, brilliantly lit. Ling Han humphed and flicked his left hand. Instantly, strange fire wrapped around his fist, which struck towards Feng Yan. Immediately, Feng Yan's expression changed. He could sense that the flames wrapped around Ling Han's fist had the ability to threaten his life. Though this was only a feeling, he believed very strongly in his feelings, as they had helped him survive many dangers and hazards previously. At this moment, he fully displayed his extraordinary prowess. He suddenly struck a fist onto the ground and unbelievably stopped in his advance due to the opposing force of the solid ground. Then he quickly stepped back in retreat. Ling Han's fist could only hit empty air. However, though Feng Yan could dodge and retreat, Feng Luo could not. Pooh! Blood spilled and Feng Luo released a terrible scream. His right arm was completely sliced off. He really sliced it off. He really did. Everyone was shocked. The Feng clan brothers were already more than out of control, but Ling Han was not the least bit inferior to them. He actually did slice off Feng Luo's arm with a strike of his sword. Ah! The area was dead silent, except for Feng Luo's terrible screams of agony, resounding around. Feng Yan's face turned completely ashen, and he said darkly, "You have successfully enraged me. Today, there is no other fate for you but death." You're angry just with this?" Ling Han asked calmly. "I still have one arm left to slice." Hiss. This guy really planned to cripple both of Feng Yan's arms. It was as if two solidified bursts of killing intent were suddenly shot from Feng Yan's eyes. When he looked at Ling Han, it was as if he wanted to stare a hole into him. He said, "If you dare to touch another hair on my brother's head, I will kill all your clansmen and everyone related to you." Chua. Ling Han's sword once again lowered, giving Feng Yan the most direct, as well as the most unyielding answer. Fuck. Feng Yan could not stop himself from cursing. He once again shot forwards, but he dared not come too closely this time round. Instead, he punched a fist forwards, and his origin power suddenly solidified into a few tens of silver fists that transformed into a powerful barrage of blows heading in Ling Han's direction. Black-grade low-level martial arts technique, torrential fists. The ability of an elite in the 7th layer of Gushing Spring tier added together with the power upgrade of a black-grade low-level martial arts technique was definitely not something that a weaker martial artist of Gushing Spring tier could stand against, no matter what kind of monster he was. The fists would strike violently and randomly, as if they were drops of rain falling in a torrential rainstorm. How could this be blocked? Ling Han's right hand held onto his sword in a stance, but his left hand stretched open. A black-colored thing spread open, as if it was an umbrella, and when it was fully spread out, it transformed into a circular object very similar to a shield that completely protected Ling Han behind it. Blood-sucking origin gold, an item that could transform according to his will. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 177, The Eldest Imperial Prince has arrived. Peng, 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 peng. Feng Yan's fists crashed into the blood-sucking origin gold and actually created flashes of silver light upon impact. That was the origin power of the fists being shattered and once again transforming back into spiritual qi. With Feng Yan's current ability, he was not yet able to break through the shield of blood-sucking origin gold, but he was indeed much more powerful than Ling Han. The extremely powerful impacts were like rolling waves that crashed into the shield repeatedly, forcing Ling Han to retreat uncontrollably again and again. When he saw the blade of his sword was getting farther and farther away from Feng Luo's shoulder, Ling Han gave a cold humph, and 6 flashes of sword qi swept forwards at the same time. Pooh! Feng Luo's left arm was also unable to escape from the fate of being sliced off. Feng Luo had fainted from the agony of his right arm being sliced off, but this strike actually caused him enough pain to wake him from his unconscious state. Ling Han quickly shot back in a retreat, and drew back his left hand. The blood-sucking origin gold once again transformed back into a bangle that encircled his wrist. He looked a bit pale. After all, even with his body a dead tree ability, suffering such a round of powerful attacks caused him to feel as if his body was boiling, so he was in a lot of pain. The area was once again in dead silence. Upon the first glance, Feng Yan was naturally at the advantage in their clash, being able to force Ling Han to retreat simply by punching a fist at empty air. However, Ling Han had still managed to slice off Feng Luo's other arm with a single strike and retreat completely unscathed, so it also looked like it was his victory. Awesome. He was really too awesome. Not just having power, but also courage. Feng Yan's face was filled with a powerful killing intent that transformed into a solid state encircling around his body. His younger brother had both his arms crippled right in front of his eyes. This caused killing intent to blaze within him. He really had to kill Ling Han. He would definitely not let this matter go. Your previous actions have completely forfeited your own life, he said with a wooden, expressionless face. As he walked towards Ling Han, his right hand gave a wave and drew out the long saber from his waist. It was eerily cold like autumn waters, and was obviously an amazing weapon. Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, "You have already moved twice, and I'm still standing here completely unharmed. Your ability only goes so far." Although that's what he said, he dared not underestimate Feng Yan in the slightest. After all, when he added together the different cultivation levels of both him and Feng Yan, they actually had a gap of 7 whole layers. "Today, no one will be able to save you," Feng Yan declared coldly. Every step he took created a heavy sound, and it was as if his steps were falling on their hearts, making everyone feel very uncomfortable. "Oh, has this Rain country changed surnames to Feng?" A clear voice rang out, and a tall man walked over. He looked to be about 30 years old, and was quite handsome. He was dressed in a crimson embroidered robe, and walked with a majestic gait, possessing the aura of a king. About a meter behind this man was a plain-looking middle-aged man, who followed his steps closely. "Eldest Imperial Prince. It's the eldest Imperial Prince. Yi. Why is the eldest Imperial Prince suddenly here? Didn't he leave the academy 2 years ago? Coincidence. Hee, this is getting fun now." Feng Yan completely takes himself to be the boss of the academy, but the eldest Imperial Prince is the real owner here. Is this a sign that these two are about to come into conflict? No matter how awesome Feng Yan is, he would not dare to oppose the eldest Imperial Prince publicly, would he? Not necessarily. Just take a look at Feng Luo's previous arrogant display and look at how Feng Yan wants to commit murder in broad daylight. They have obviously no regard for the Emperor's laws at all. Let's just wait and see. The spectators all started murmuring their thoughts and ideas to each other. Now that things had come this far, it was already a bit out of control. Even the eldest imperial prince had come to involve himself in the matter. Xuanhuan, why are you not paying your greetings when you see the eldest imperial prince? The middle-aged man behind the eldest imperial prince rebuked coldly. Xuanhuan slightly hesitated for a moment, then raised his clasped hands in the eldest imperial prince's direction and said, Xuanhuan hereby greets your imperial highness, the eldest imperial prince. How arrogant, he actually only raised his clasped hands in greeting. The middle-aged man was about to speak up in reprimand again when he saw the eldest imperial prince stretch out an arm, which forced the former to swallow whatever words he was about to say. Xuanhuan, step back. The eldest imperial prince said. This man has crippled both my brother's arms and I'm going to take his life in return, Xuanhuan said in a calm tone after regaining control over his emotions. However, although he spoke calmly, there was a determination that lay behind his words that said he would not be refused. The eldest imperial prince could not help but look displeased. With his status in the whole Rain country, aside from the clan heads of the 8 great clans of Rain country, Liang Guangzhu, Wu Songlin and the other rare few at the same level, who would dare to not give him face. Xuanhuan, you have overstepped your bounds. The eldest imperial prince said coldly. Though he was not the emperor yet, at a certain level, he could represent the imperial family. Any words he said had enormous weight behind them, so how could his words simply be refused like that? Heng, he crippled my brother, and I will take his life in exchange. Isn't this fair? Xuanhuan displayed his overbearing and unreasonable nature, actually not giving the slightest face to the eldest imperial prince at all. Xuanhuan, do you have any idea what you are doing now? The eldest imperial prince asked. He was also angered by now. Any lands under the skies were all under imperial authority, who would dare to disobey the words of the emperor. I have long heard that the eldest imperial prince was a core disciple of Huyang Academy in the previous generation. Please allow this Xuanhuan to experience your ability, Xuanhuan said. The area erupted in an uproar. Xuanhuan actually pitted himself against the eldest imperial prince. Putting aside the eldest imperial prince's status, when he left the academy 2 years ago, he was a core disciple. Though he had yet to break through to spiritual ocean tier now, he was definitely in the 9th layer of gushing spring tier, and added together with the eldest imperial prince's talent in martial arts, he was practically invincible in the gushing spring tier. In the current Huyang Academy, the 3rd imperial prince was considered the most powerful student, but he was only in the 7th layer of gushing spring tier, and even he would most likely lose against the eldest imperial prince. Xuanhuan was only a true disciple, so where did he get the courage and confidence to think that he was worthy of opposing the 3rd imperial prince? The eldest imperial prince could not help but grow even angrier. This Xuanhuan not only dared to disobey his commands, he even wanted to challenge him. He was indeed outrageously bold. However, as the eldest imperial prince, he was a very subtle person and so would naturally not show any sign of his emotions on his face as he asked calmly, "You really want to challenge me?" "Please," Xuanhuan said very decisively. The aura from his whole body came out in a wave, emanating a powerful might. 7th layer of gushing spring tier. The eldest imperial prince could not help but look astonished. How had Xuanhuan risen to such a formidable height in such a short period of time? What? 7th layer of gushing spring tier, really? Since the eldest imperial prince has said so, then it is most likely true. No wonder he actually dared to challenge the eldest imperial prince, so he is in the 7th layer of gushing spring tier. That's not right. Even if he is in spiritual ocean tier, so what? That's the eldest imperial prince there. That's true. I really don't know what backer Xuanhuan has. Could it be he really is the illegitimate son of the headmaster? All of the spectators were exclaiming in surprise. That was the 7th layer of gushing spring tier, and Xuanhuan had actually caught up with the 3rd imperial prince, but when one took into account Xuanhuan's young age, he could definitely be considered as the most talented and strongest genius of Rain country. No wonder he dared to challenge me. The eldest imperial prince's expression darkened, and he said, "Then, make your move." Without any reservation, Feng Yan leaped forwards in the eldest imperial prince's direction. He did not use his saber, but simply used his fists to create a barrage of attacks. There was a layer of silvery light wrapped around his fists, which exuded an unusually powerful aura. Using fists in front of me. The eldest imperial prince humphed and a cold light flashed through his eyes. He similarly attacked with his fists. It was as if an emperor had arrived, which caused an irrepressible pounding to rise up in everyone's hearts. They all felt the urge to kneel down on the ground and declare themselves to be loyal subjects of the eldest imperial prince. Son of Heaven Fist Technique. Peng, 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 peng. The two of them clashed endlessly, and the eldest imperial prince visibly had the upper hand. His cultivation level was higher, he had greater power, and the Son of Heaven Fist technique dominated over Feng Yan's own martial arts technique in terms of grade. If he was still unable to gain the advantage in the clash with all these factors in play, then it was really illogical. Ling Han's eyes narrowed slightly, and when he looked upon the silvery light exuding from Feng Yan, he murmured to himself, "Special physical constitution." Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 178, Mirror Light Body. This had to be a special physical constitution, Ling Han said decisively in his mind. If it was not due to his special physical constitution, Feng Yan would have been blasted to pieces by the eldest imperial prince by now. Though Feng Yan was at a disadvantage in their clash, he was still composed and calm. When he defended himself, he would also press forwards in attack, and every move contained a great explosive burst of power behind it. What special physical constitution could that be? Ling Han was observing very closely. The reason why special physical constitutions could be described as special was naturally because they had certain characteristics that made them special and unique. For example, Zhu Wuju could recover from his wounds very rapidly, Hu Nu could transform whatever food she consumed into her own reserves of origin power, and he, with his acquired special physical constitution, could greatly increase his defenses, and like a dead tree, would feel nothing even when he suffered serious injury, not allowing the pain to affect him, and continue to display his battle prowess to the fullest. So what special characteristic did Feng Yan have, then? Hong, hong, hong. Feng Yan and the eldest imperial prince endlessly clashed, and there was only brute force behind every fist, without any hint of technique. As the power behind their fists clashed against each other, the impact actually created a power wave that was visible to the naked eye, and this shockwave was spreading out in all directions, forcing the spectators to step back in retreat continuously. Yi. Ling Han had noticed that Feng Yan's complexion was becoming more and more brightly white, and this was definitely not due to the use of origin power, it seemed more like that was the real color of his complexion. Could it be mirror light body? He mumbled. Though he was still dubious, it was almost confirmed for him. The owner of mirror light body had the ability to reflect any attacks he suffered, as if he himself was a mirror reflecting light. However, even a special physical constitution could be split up into different categories based on the purity of the bloodline. Thus, there were roughly 3 categories for mirror light body. Weakest of all was the bronze mirror body, which could only reflect about 10% of every attack, and the next strongest was silver mirror body, which could increase the rate of reflection to 20%, while the strongest, the gold mirror body, could reflect about 30% of every attack. Don't underestimate the 10 to 30% of attack that could be reflected. It not only would decrease the power behind an opponent's attack, it could even become one's own power that could be aimed back at your opponent. In a simpler example, at first, it was 10 points of attack power against 10 points of attack power. Then, even if it had only become 9 points against 11 points, the gap would have increased by 20%, what more when it was 7 points against 13. That was practically a 100% gap in power. From the looks of Feng Yan, he should have a silver mirror body, and was able to reflect about 20% of the attacks. It was exactly this 20% of power reflected back that compensated for the difference of 2 layers in cultivation level behind Feng Yan and the eldest imperial prince. As a result, though Feng Yan was still at an obvious disadvantage, he was not defeated. That's not right. Ling Han shook his head. The 20% of power could possibly compensate for the difference in cultivation levels, but could not compensate for the inferiority of Feng Yan's martial arts technique as compared to the eldest imperial prince's Son of Heaven fist technique, which most likely should have reached black grade high level. It was not that this fist technique was of a high grade by itself, but with the installation of power of the nation, it could have might that could compare to a black grade high level martial arts technique. Since Feng Yan was able to stand against the Son of Heaven fist technique with a mere black grade low level martial arts technique, then he must definitely have had some other ability. Otherwise, he would at least have to be on the same cultivation level as his opponent, and depend on the mirror light body to compensate for the gap in their respective martial arts techniques. What could it be? Ling Han could not help but become curious. The eldest imperial prince's battle prowess was outstanding. Though he had been stuck on this 9th layer of gushing spring tier for quite some years, it had also allowed him to fortify his foundations on this cultivation level to an unbearably sturdy level. His current battle prowess should be worth about 12 battle stars. And it was obvious that neither side had played their trump cards yet. At least, both these young men had formed Qi, but neither of them had used it yet. If Qi was taken into consideration, then their battle prowess could obviously increase further. The spectators were all watching dumbfounded. The eldest imperial prince was in the 9th layer of gushing spring tier and was a core disciple in his time, yet Feng Yan could actually manage to not fall in a clash with him. This guy was really too strong. The 3rd imperial prince, Xuanhuan, Yi, the current generation of core disciples, most likely were no longer able to match Feng Yan anymore, right? Though they were on opposing sides, Ling Han could strongly agree that Feng Yan was indeed powerful. This guy was indeed a genius of martial arts, not only having mysterious means but also a terrifyingly strong understanding of battle, and as he continued to watch, he would often nod in approval. Feng Yan just barely made the cut to being worthy enough to be trampled by him. The eldest imperial prince was like an emperor, while Feng Yan was like a demon god who freely displayed his domineering attitude, unreasonable and insolent. However, the two of them managed to keep their clash on even standing. In the condition when neither side was willing to play more of their trump cards, the battle had come to a deadlock. Stop! An old voice rang out, though this voice held within it incomparable might. Feng Yan and the eldest imperial prince both stopped attacking, though they still looked at each other fiercely, their battle spirits still high, as if wanting to continue battling to their heart's content. Lian Guangzhu appeared, and the aura of an elite of spiritual pedestal tier spread out, causing everyone to feel as if there was a gigantic rock pressing down on their hearts. They could feel that their feet were strangely heavy in an urge to kneel down. He took one look at Ling Han, shook his head, and said, "Little fellow, you really know how to make trouble." Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, "Headmaster, it's not that I am really good at making trouble, but this blind fool actually came to look for trouble purposely with me. Thus, I could only slice him up a bit to give him a lesson. But I am still very merciful, and did not take his life." He was a little curious. Previously, Lian Guangzhu was obviously very optimistic about his martial arts talent, and looked practically like he wanted to cultivate Ling Han like a disciple, yet there had suddenly been no news from him at all, and now there was obviously a drastic change in attitude from him. What a sharp mouth that is skilled at overturning facts. Do you think everyone is an idiot? You crippled my brother's arms, and this is already a breach of academy regulations. According to the rules, you should be killed for your crime. Feng Yan said darkly. Feng Yan, though I have just come here, and did not see the start and finish of this whole matter clearly, but it seems as if it was your brother who had threatened to slice someone else's arm first, right? The eldest imperial prince interrupted. Since you did not see clearly the start and the end of the matter, then shut up. Feng Yan cast a cold glance at the eldest imperial prince. Pooh. Everyone was shocked speechless. Did Feng Yan actually reprimand the eldest imperial prince? A younger member of a minor clan actually dared to openly reprimand the eldest son of the current reign emperor. What kind of outrageously bold act was that? Immediately, the eldest imperial prince's face turned ashen, and a powerful killing intent was brimming in his eyes. As the saying goes, when the emperor goes into a rage, blood could flow over 10,000 miles. Though he was not the emperor yet, as the eldest imperial prince, he was still very powerful and mighty. You didn't see the start and the end of the matter either, so what are you blabbering so excitedly about? Ling Han opened his mouth and said to Xuanhuan in castigation. All right. This was an awesome guy too. Everyone else felt like they were about to lose their minds. Whether it was Ling Han or Xuanhuan, where had they gotten such strong confidence to dare to create such a commotion? Headmaster, please apprehend Ling Han and hand him over to me to be dealt with. Xuanhuan turned and said to Lian Guangzhu. Though his words were polite, it seemed as if he was requesting Lian Guangzhu to do as he requested. To make a request of an elite of spiritual pedestal tier, and someone who held the revered position of headmaster of the martial arts department. The others were all in disbelief. Though Xuanhuan had offended the eldest imperial prince previously, the latter was still in gushing spring tier, after all. In this world where the most important thing was martial arts ability, the eldest imperial prince was far from being able to compare to Lian Guangzhu in terms of status. Lian Guangzhu's status was only below the current reign emperor in Rain country, and was able to stand on even ground with the clan heads of the 8 great clans. Commanding Lian Guangzhu, the others could not help but gather a layer of cold sweat on their bodies. Headmaster, the eldest imperial prince interrupted, looking at Lian Guangzhu. Lian Guangzhu sighed, and said, please do not interfere in this matter, eldest imperial prince. What? When they heard his words, did that mean the Lian Guangzhu was going to obey Xuanhuan's command? Heng, old man Lian, if it was me who wanted to interfere, are you planning to stop me too? Wu Songlin appeared, looking coldly at Lian Guangzhu. Hiss, here comes another big boss, everyone thought. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 179, Olive Branch. Old man Wu, don't interfere with this matter. Lian Guangzhu waved his hand. I do not want to spoil our many years of friendship. Nonsense. Wu Songlin instantly rebuked. This brat has, after all, dealt someone a crippling injury, so he must definitely be punished according to the academy regulations. Lian Guangzhu's attitude also became unyielding. Wasn't it just crippling a piece of trash? Wu Songlin dismissed lightly. Master Wu, please speak cautiously. Xuanhuan interrupted, actually carrying a hint of threat in his tone. Who do you think you are that you dare to reprimand me? Wu Songlin humphed, his right hand flashing out in a strike towards Xuanhuan. He was an elite of spiritual pedestal tier, so though this strike was only a very casual move, it held within it unbelievable power. Origin power transformed into a gigantic hand that flew towards Xuanhuan. Peng! Lian Guangzhu moved in the nick of time, and managed to disperse the power behind Wu Songlin's blow. He frowned, and said, Old man Wu, are you intending to go against me? As long as you don't touch him, I naturally would not bother to fight you either. Wu Songlin took one step back. Lian Guangzhu stared at Wu Songlin, and Wu Songlin also stared at him. 2 old men, whose ages added together came up to a total of over 150 years, were thus stuck in a glaring contest with each other. All right. Old man Wu, I'll give you face this time. Lian Guangzhu nodded. Headmaster, Xuanhuan spoke up, displeased. Heng, bring your brother with you, let's go and see if we can still manage to reattach his arms. Lian Guangzhu frowned in slight impatience. Xuanhuan did not dare to say anything else. He simply picked up Feng Luo and followed at the heels of Lian Guangzhu. One pair of the 4 great guardian deities each carried one of Feng Luo's arms, and the party left together. A chaotic conflict thus ended in this manner. Wu Songlin gave Ling Han a light nod, and left directly. There were too many people here, so he did not want to reveal the relationship between himself and Ling Han. He only wanted to let him know that Ling Han was under his protection, and that was enough. Brother Ling, if you do not mind, why not join me for a cup of tea? The eldest imperial prince said to Ling Han, smiling. Ling Han smiled, and said, many thanks for your help just now, Your Imperial Highness. This Ling Han is extremely grateful. Please. Please. The two of them left together, and when he passed by Li Hao and Zhu Zuyi, Ling Han said, the two of you go to the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion and seek out Xuanhuan. Just tell him that it was I who told the two of you to go, and stay at his place for a while. Thank you, Big Brother Ling. Li Hao and Zhu Zuyi said, filled with gratitude. Ling Han nodded. The reason why the two of them had been targeted by Feng Luo was because of him after all, so he would definitely not just stand by and watch as they continue to be victimized. The eldest imperial prince brought Ling Han with him to a tea shop and requested for an elegant room. The middle-aged man naturally stood guard outside the door, and only Ling Han and the eldest imperial prince were seated inside. I heard that Brother Ling is very friendly with various Grandmaster alchemists, and from what I witnessed today, that is indeed the case, the eldest imperial prince said. His eyes were slightly guarded, and there was also a sliver of heat in his gaze. Ling Han knew very well that the third imperial prince had, thanks to him, welcomed quite a few of previously hesitating neutral parties into his camp. As a result, the eldest imperial prince could naturally not stay composed in the face of this, and similarly extended an olive branch towards him. Before this, alchemists would never interfere in the competition for the throne as they stood completely above it. However, with Ling Han's appearance, many different unpredictable variables were all of a sudden added into the balance. If any imperial prince managed to gain Ling Han's support, that would be equivalent to gaining the support of the alchemists of Rain Country. This was an incomparably terrifying power, and even if the current Rain Emperor wanted to pass on his throne, he would have to consider things carefully. After all, this could possibly disturb the roots of the empire. Thus, the eldest imperial prince also hoped to maintain a good relationship with Ling Han. Additionally, Wu Songlin's previous attitude also reaffirmed this idea in his mind. Ling Han smiled, and said, does the eldest imperial prince know what means that Feng Yan has obtained that even Headmaster Lian would be so partial towards him? The eldest imperial prince frowned, and revealed a furious expression. He could not help but smack a hand on the table, and said, that traitor. He might not hate Feng Yan so much, but it was obvious that Feng Yan and Ling Han were deadly foes. Thus, he naturally would not mind presenting a slightly exaggerated front in order to form a closer relationship with Ling Han. This man has a special physical constitution and is also very powerful in battle. However, if it was just that, he could only at most obtain Lian Guanzu's recognition, but would definitely not be able to command the latter. But from the looks of Feng Yan's attitude, though he looks respectful on the surface, in truth, it seems as if he is Lian Guangzu's superior. This is indeed strange, Ling Han murmured. The eldest imperial prince sank into a pensive state as well. What power had Feng Yan obtained that could actually cause an elite of spiritual pedestal tier, a highly revered old headmaster at that, to practically obey his commands? As the eldest imperial prince of Rain Country, he actually had no idea about any of this, and this caused a kind of unease to rise up in him. I will begin investigating this matter, the eldest imperial prince said, then looked towards Ling Han and continued with a serious expression, Brother Ling is a smart man, so I will not beat around the bush and waste time. What do you want to say, Your Imperial Highness? Ling Han said with a slight smile, though he already knew why the eldest imperial prince had paid him this visit. I would like to ask you to assist me to ascend to the throne. The eldest imperial prince said. Suddenly, the aura of a ruler exuded from him, and his eyes shone with a powerful light. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, what ability do I have that I could actually help Your Imperial Highness ascend to the throne? Ha 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 ha, Brother Ling, you are being too modest. The eldest imperial prince laughed loudly before he suddenly changed the topic. If I successfully ascend to the throne, the Ling clan would be a loyal subject that has performed an outstanding service for me. I would be able to name you a king. King. If these words were heard by the members of the court, they would definitely be shocked numb by the weight of this promise. In the history of Rain Country, there had never been anyone who had rendered such outstanding service that they would be named as a king, even if they were not members of the Qi family. For royal subjects, this could be considered as the highest honor they could attain in their lifetimes. As a result, the eldest imperial prince's face was filled with expectation. He believed that Ling Han would immediately agree. However, he was very quickly disappointed, as there was no hint of change in Ling Han's expression at all. His eyes were clear and deep, as if great imperial power was only a fleeting scene in his eyes. Ling Han slowly opened his mouth, and said, I do not have any bit of interest in power. In his last life, he had been one of the strongest existences in this world after all, what more when he had also been the Alchemy Emperor. How could a mere mortal emperor compare to the power he had in his grasp at the time? In this lifetime, he only had one target, and that was to become a grandmaster of martial arts, shatter the void, break through his mortal chains and become a god. The eldest imperial prince was actually a very good speaker, but now he suddenly felt a kind of awkwardness that came from not knowing how to continue the conversation. This was because he had already revealed his best trump card, yet Ling Han did not even spare him any consideration. Could it be that he had to yield the imperial throne itself to Ling Han? That has got to be a joke. He considered for a moment, and said, Brother Ling, if I manage to ascend to the throne, I will allow you to have the chance to break through to flower blossoming tier. Ling Han could not help but put on a strange expression, casting a look at the eldest imperial prince. In Rain Country, due to the restrictions placed on martial arts and cultivation techniques, no matter how highly talented one was, they would still be unable to break through to flower blossoming tier. Thus, this oath of the eldest imperial prince could be considered to be unbelievably shocking. Even the elders of the 8 great clans would most likely be moved by this promise. However, for Ling Han, what was so difficult about breaking through to flower blossoming tier? He was an elite of heaven tier in his last life. Though I am not sure about the exact details, but it should have some relation with power of the nation, right? Ling Han was indeed quite curious, and asked the eldest imperial prince with a raised brow. The eldest imperial prince was instantly struck dumb. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 180, Eye of Truth. The power of the nation could help an elite of spiritual pedestal tier break through to flower blossoming tier. Such a huge secret was only discovered by the eldest imperial prince under the most coincidental of circumstances. Moreover, this was not the actual flower blossoming tier, as it required the continuous installation of power of the nation to allow one to maintain his cultivation of flower blossoming tier. Otherwise, one would very quickly once again fall back to the mortal plane. It was precisely because of this that there existed only a single elite warrior of flower blossoming tier in the whole of Rain Country. When the eldest imperial prince set out this condition, he was actually being a little untruthful. When he ascended the throne, he would definitely stimulate the power of the nation for Ling Han's use, but the length of the period that Ling Han could access it, that was a different story. After all, by that time, he would be the new Rain Emperor, and have gained control over the entire empire and immeasurable power. Who would dare go against him, or object to his actions? He had never thought that Ling Han seemed to have a deeper understanding of the power of the nation than even him, and Ling Han obviously did not place much importance on it either. He could not help but be flabbergasted. Women, wealth, and power, all of these were unwanted. He could still understand that, but that even the possibility of breaking through to flower blossoming tier could be set aside so easily as if it was something common, he was really at a loss by now. Such a man seemed to have completely no wants or desires, and as the saying went, a man without wants could stay firm in his resolution. What else could he offer that would successfully attract Ling Han to support him? Ling Han smiled and said, in truth, I am only friends with the 3rd imperial prince, and have never become his subordinate. I can also become friends with your Imperial Highness. I have no desire for power, and have no intention to interfere in a struggle for power either. The eldest Imperial Prince finally looked better at this. He frowned slightly, considered for a while, then spoke. Does young Master Han have any interest in mystical power? Previously, he had already taken Ling Han to be a profligate spoilt young master who had somehow managed to obtain the favor of a considerable number of alchemists, just like Xuanhuan, who had some kind of unknown background. As a result, though he still placed a lot of importance on maintaining an amiable relation with Ling Han, it was a different story whether he truly respected Ling Han or not in his heart. However, through this conversation with Ling Han, he did not dare underestimate this young man who was only 16 or 17 years old any longer, and unconsciously began to use a respectful address for Ling Han. Ling Han was surprised, and asked, "Mystical power?" "That's right, mystical power." The eldest Imperial Prince nodded, and began to explain, mystical powers are extremely unique. Some mystical powers could wound your enemies and possess formidable power. Some mystical powers could only assist and support you in battle. Some claim them to be a kind of martial arts technique, yet they will not expend your origin power. However, every kind of mystical power is extremely precious, and could never be obtained even with a large amount of wealth. Ling Han naturally knew what mystical powers were. These techniques were extremely rare, even he in his last life had not witnessed the use of mystical powers too many times. However, from the few times that he had seen them in action, they had left behind a very powerful impression on his memory. When he ventured deep into various historical sites, he encountered a kind of special physical constitution that could use a mystical power that could swallow the heavens and devour the earth. The user was obviously only in deity transformation tier, yet still managed to swallow him into his stomach, and he was almost digested. Though the holder of this special physical institution was later eliminated by Ling Han, if he was to be honest, then if both of them were at the same cultivation level, even if Ling Han was in the 9th layer and his opponent was merely in the 1st, the conclusion of their battle could possibly be completely different. Unfortunately, he had not managed to pry the origins of this mystical power from the mouth of that enemy of his. Ling Han's interest was stirred, and he asked, "From the words of your Imperial Highness, you apparently possess a mystical power then?" "I do not, but the National Treasury does," the eldest Imperial Prince said with a serious expression. "As long as young Master Han helps me ascend to the throne, I will definitely hand over this mystical power over to you." Ling Han shook his head, and said, "Your Imperial Highness is not being very sincere. If you can manage to bring this mystical power and show it to me within these few days, I can consider your offer. The mystical power is much too precious, and is locked within the inner chambers. Even I am unable to enter within, so how am I supposed to bring it out for you?" The eldest Imperial Prince said with a little frustration. Ling Han had obtained a useful piece of information, and that was that the National Treasury had an inner chamber within. He laughed, and said, "Then what is the effect of this mystical power? Your Imperial Highness should at least know this, right?" "Eye of Truth," the eldest Imperial Prince said, looking a bit guilty. He had never cultivated this mystical power before, but knew that the Eye of Truth would not increase one's battle prowess in any way, and could only help one to see through false illusions. In his opinion, what use was there for this ability? Thus, he was naturally a bit guilty. But no matter how lousy a mystical power it was still a mystical power. That was why he dared to offer it to tempt Ling Han to support him. Ling Han was stunned for a moment before ecstasy rose up in his heart. The Eye of Truth indeed did not possess any ability to damage or harm one's opponent. However, it was even more precious than a lot of other mystical powers that had ability to attack, because it would allow one to see through all kinds of false illusions and see the real truth. In a simpler example, after cultivating the Eye of Truth, he need not fear any kinds of illusionary arts nor deceptions. And what was even more terrifying was the fact that the Eye of Truth would allow him to see the weaknesses of both himself and his opponent. Being able to see the weaknesses of others would allow him to maximize his attacks to the full extent, while being able to see his own weaknesses would allow him to improve upon them. Even if there was no way he could improve his weaknesses, he would still be able to protect these weak points of his better. Ling Han did not know whether there was any even stronger ability to this mystical power or not. After all, he had only heard of this kind of mystical power and had never seen it before in his last life. Who would have thought that, in this tiny little rain country, there would actually be hidden such a powerful mystical power? Ling Han thought for a moment. He had indeed discovered a considerable number of precious treasures in Rain Country, such as the remains of an ultimate warrior of shattering void tier. Perhaps when so many elites and ultimate warriors had gathered all those years ago, there had been a few that had only suffered heavy injuries but had not died. After the battle, they stayed in Rain Country and left behind such a powerful mystical power like the Eye of Truth. Ling Han was moved in his heart, but there was no hint of change in his expression. How could he so easily wear his heart on his sleeve after 2 whole lifetimes won? He asked, "Your Imperial Highness does not seem to have cultivated this mystical power. Otherwise, he may not take it out as a bargaining chip." The eldest Imperial Prince shook his head and said, "The Eye of Truth has a very special condition for inheritance. It is hidden in an eyeball, and one must somehow gain its acceptance and acknowledgement before it would directly enter into one's consciousness. Otherwise, it is only a piece of scrap." Ling Han gave an "oh" at this. No wonder he had not managed to find the mystical power, swallow the heavens and devour the earth. So this kind of inheritance was completely different from cultivation techniques and martial arts, and was not depicted in mere words or pictures. Intriguing. He smiled and said, "When your Imperial Highness can bring that eyeball to me, we can continue to discuss our cooperation. But, as for now, let's just be friends, all right?" The eldest Imperial Prince knew very well that empty promises would not be able to move Ling Han. Whatever he could promise, so could the third Imperial Prince, which meant he had no advantage over the latter. However, he had at least managed to befriend Ling Han, so other matters could be advanced slowly. "Young Master Han, there will be an auction at the Spirit Treasures Pavilion the day after tomorrow, and it is rumored that there will even be an incomparably precious foundation building pill up for auction. Are you interested to go take a look?" The eldest Imperial Prince earnestly inquired him. Ling Han could not help but put on a strange expression. This foundation building pill was naturally his, but he had never thought that it would actually become the most precious of auction items. He was just about to shake his head in refusal, but then reconsidered. Rain Country's overall level was too low. Who knows if there may be some treasures that may not be recognized for their worth. "I don't mind going for a look." He changed his mind. "Ha ha ha ha. Then I shall come receive you personally the day after tomorrow." The eldest Imperial Prince was very satisfied. If he appeared in public with Ling Han, then that would definitely create an image that he had a very close relationship with Ling Han. By that time, those middle-class clans would have to reconsider their decisions. Ling Han nodded and took his leave. He still had to go and visit Li Hao and Zhu Ziyi. End of the chapter. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao will be read in 5 chapters for every Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Sunday. Please leave this sound novel and press subscribe, follow, and the bell so you don't miss any new clips as well. See you.